10 years. That's how long the dead had been walking among the living. The world had changed in ways no one could have anticipated. It wasn't a sudden apocalypse, not like the movies had shown. No, this was different. The slow burn of humanity's collapse was punctuated by moments of terror, diseases, disasters, wars. But it was the dead that changed everything. It started with a virus, a mutation of something ancient. At first, people thought it was just a bad flu, a fever that lingered too long. But then came the reanimations, the first whispers of the dead walking again. At first, there were reports of people in certain regions coming back after death. But it wasn't until the first large-scale attack on a city that everyone realized this was something much darker. The infection spread quickly, and before long, the dead outnumbered the living. Now, 10 years later, humanity had retreated to pockets of resistance. Small, fortified cities were all that remained of what had once been a thriving world. There were no more grand metropolises, no more nations, only survivors, clinging to what they could. Kara stood on the rooftop of the last bastion of humanity, New Haven. A city built like a fortress, surrounded by a wall so tall it blocked out the horizon. The air was thick with smoke from the constant fires burning on the outskirts, and the scent of death seemed to cling to the very walls of the city. It was a cold day, but Kara didn't feel it. Not anymore. It had been years since the cold bothered her, or the heat, or anything for that matter. She had long since stopped caring about the world outside the walls. All that mattered now was survival. She adjusted her rifle, scanning the horizon. There was movement in the distance, a slow, shuffling mass that seemed to stretch endlessly. The zombies, or, as people called them now, the Wanderers. She adjusted her rifle, scanning the horizon. There was movement in the distance, a slow, shuffling mass that seemed to stretch endlessly. The zombies, or as people called them now, the Wanderers. The word had lost its meaning. They were no longer the mindless, ravenous creatures of the first days. No. Over the years, the infection had evolved. The Wanderers now moved with purpose, and though their bodies rotted and decayed, their minds had learned to adapt. They could smell living flesh, follow sounds, and even herd others like cattle. But it wasn't the decay that made them dangerous anymore. It was the way they organized. How many today? Kara's voice was rough, her words clipped. She didn't need to look behind her to know who was speaking. It was Eli, her partner in this new world. He was standing by the door leading back into the city, his rifle resting on his shoulder. His face was pale, eyes sunken, but there was an urgency in his movements, a quiet readiness. Too many, Kara replied. They're getting closer. They've been circling the city for days. It's like they know we're here. Eli nodded grimly. We'll have to make a run for the supply caches tomorrow. We can't wait much longer. Kara didn't answer. There wasn't much to say anymore. They had all learned the same lesson after 10 years. Hope was a luxury. Survival was the only thing that mattered. The sound of a child crying echoed from below, and Kara's heart sank. The kids in New Haven had never known a world without the dead. They were born into this nightmare, raised on stories of the before times, a time they would never see, a time when people weren't afraid to walk the streets in broad daylight. But now, even the children understood the cost of survival. The city had become a cage, a prison for everyone, young and old. I'll go check the west gate, Eli said, already turning to leave. Kara watched him disappear into the darkness. She didn't know how much longer they could keep living like this. The walls of New Haven had started to feel less like protection and more like a coffin. The city's population had dwindled to almost nothing. Families gone, friends gone. And yet, the Wanderers kept coming, drawn to the scent of life. A small sound broke her thoughts, a tapping on the rooftop door. She didn't flinch. She'd grown used to the oddities of this new world. As she turned, her rifle ready, the door creaked open. It was Lila, a young woman in her late teens, one of the few remaining survivors in New Haven. She was holding a ragged piece of paper in her hand, eyes wide with excitement. "We found something," Lila said breathlessly. "A group of survivors. They're not far from here. They're on their way to us." Kara stared at her, disbelief flooding her chest. "How do you know they're not just—" "They're human," Lila interrupted. "I can hear them on the radio. They've been broadcasting for days. They want to make contact." Kara's heart skipped a beat. Hope. It was the last thing anyone wanted to feel, and yet it bubbled up inside her. A faint, fleeting idea that maybe, just maybe, there was something more to this hell than endless running and hiding. Lila handed her the paper, and Kara's eyes skimmed the message. Coordinates, directions, the promise of another settlement, one that hadn't fallen yet. But before she could say anything, the wind shifted, and Kara's skin prickled with that familiar, sickening feeling. She glanced up at the horizon once more, her grip tightening around the rifle. The Wanderers were closer now, too close. "There's no time," she muttered. "We need to get out of here. Fast." Lila's face fell. "What do you mean?" "The Wanderers. They're not just circling. They're getting smarter. They know we're here." Kara's voice was cold, urgent. "And if we don't move now, we're dead." Lila's eyes widened in realization. "But we just found them. The survivors. If we leave now, we leave or we die. Now, move." Kara was already heading for the door, but as she stepped into the hallway, something made her pause. A sound distant at first grew louder, the unmistakable shuffle of feet. Not just one or two, hundreds. The Wanderers weren't circling anymore. They were coming. As the city's alarm bell rang out, Kara turned to Lila, her face grim. "This is it." Lila stared at her in confusion. "What do you mean?" "This is the last city," Kara whispered. "And this is the last fight.